I feel that for the past while when I've been talking about the Amiga, I've often been talking about games for the computer that are, well, not good. I guess there's some reasons for that. Perhaps the main reason, if you've been following the live streams that I do, you might know that last year I did a big old wheel of Euro platformers the Amiga, which was an interesting experience, and it certainly uncovered a lot of games that were of quite bad quality. Ones that I knew and also ones that I don't know. And certainly since then, yeah, when I've done an Amiga video, usually it's been something a bit more negative. Now, I perhaps do want to get this a bit out of my system, so I've got another worst games list here. It's a list of, in my opinion, the worst Amiga games, or at least the ones that I have played. I kind of struggled with just how many I want to do here. I kind of thought that 50 was a little too low, but 100, a bit too high. So I've gone in the middle. This list is the top 75, or perhaps rather bottom 75, that's the line in every video, of Amiga games that I've played, the worst ones. We've got all sorts here, ranging from the famous bad games to the rather obscure ones that you may not know at all, various different genres, quite a lot of action admittedly, but hopefully it's a good representation of stuff that, well, you probably shouldn't play on your Amiga unless you're very, very curious. And there's nothing wrong with that, but, you know, just look, listen, and take heed. Anyway, we've got 75 games to go through, so let's get started. Beginning proceedings on this list, we have Allo Allo Cartoon Fun, a game from Alternative. I think that this is certainly an appropriate way to kick things off at number 75. Allo Allo is far from the worst looking game on this list, it's far from the worst controlling game, it's far from the worst anything, but the main question with this one is quite simply, why? Why on earth was there a game based on, of all things, Allo Allo, the classic British sitcom? The game itself is very typical Euro platformer fluff where you play as Rene and you try and find various things such as pictures of the fallen Madonna with the big boobies, and you'll see a lot of the other characters from the show milling about, but really there's nothing here. It's a very generic game and it is one with a completely silly premise. Probably the most definitive thing about the game is that one of the very first things you see is a dog urinating, continuously. I mean, that's certainly a good image to start this list, better than anything else that I can think of. In at number 74 is a game called Jurajski Sen. Now, there's quite a few Polish games that you get, normally released in like the years between like 1994 and 1997, often by LK Avalon as this one is. A lot of them tend to have the most famous thing about them being very weird box art. A lot of the times the game itself aren't necessarily too terrible. Jurajski Sen here is probably one of the weakest ones that I've played, certainly when it comes to platforms. The game roughly translates to, or in fact I believe it exactly translates to, Jurassic Dream, and, well, it's a very bog-standard platformer with a really long intro to boot. For the time that it was released, yeah, this just is not a game that cuts the mustard at all. Frustratingly designed, very annoying single-screen FLUG that really takes you back to almost 6 years before 1995, and it's not too long before you just end up getting a big, massive cognac grey flashing over your screen. Not good at all. Thunderblade is here as the first arcade conversion, and this from US Gold is quite miserable. Certainly a very weak one, although we will be seeing worse examples. Thunderblade has just utterly broken controls. It's the sort of thing that you find when companies insisted that one button must be used, it can only be a one-button joystick. Basically, the only thing you can really do to get your chopper moving is to fly directly at the top of the screen and just continuously fire missiles. That's all you can really do. If you stop firing missiles, then your speed tends to go down, because the speed and the firing of missiles is pretty much totally connected, and you can't really be anywhere but the top of the screen. It's uncontrollable, really. There's no way to get any precision in the movement, and I dread to think what this game is like if you were somehow able to get to stage 2 of Thunderblade and have to fly your way around through all those caves and that. How on earth would you even do that? Just ridiculous controls. And the other weird thing about this game is that it also has a Pepsi sponsorship, which I don't know why Pepsi decided to sponsor this terrible conversion of Thunderblade in particular, but there they are. That's where you take your helicopter off from. Dreadful version of a really good arcade game. Speaking of dreadful conversions of arcade games, Outrun is a kind of obvious entry into this list. A lot of people really dislike the Amiga version of Outrun, and it's easy to see why. It's just so choppy and miserable. It's an early conversion. It was around 1987 when this was released for the Amiga, but I'm not even sure if that's really that much of an excuse. I mean, you could play games like Super Hang-On, which had a brilliant conversion from around the same time. So it's just really quite dispiriting that Outrun is this bad. And of course you do have the rather infamous and completely out of place intro as well, with its kind of super bad mock horror style Hollywood theme music. It's like, what on earth were they even trying to do there? Yep, obviously belongs. Terminator 2 Judgment Day, another licensed game and, well, another miserable time here for Ocean. This Terminator 2 is one of the worst of the classic Ocean licensed hybrid affairs where you get various types of gameplay. Basically what happens in this one is that you start off with a very bog standard and very boring one-on-one fight in the shopping mall against the T-1000. You then go from there to the top-down section where you're on the motorbike and you're trying to get away from the T-1000 in the big truck, and you'll probably end up dying there because it's a bloody silly ass turbo tunnel type thing where you've got to try and memorize anything, and naturally you only get one life, so you're just going to have to repeat this over and over again. And the idea of basically having to do that for every other level in this game is utterly unpalatable. Miserable effort from Ocean, especially considering just how much the game was hyped up. Like, Ocean really hyped up T2 as one of, their classic licensed games in the similar form to games like RoboCop and Batman, but yeah, this one's just awful. G-Loc R360. We've got a lot of awful conversions in the list. G-Loc R360 is just a game that doesn't even really belong on somewhere like the Amiga anyway, because, I mean, the arcade game itself, especially if you are to take away the whopping great machine that it's most associated with, it's a pretty empty affair. I mean, it's much more shallow a game even than something like Afterburner. And so that's what you get here. You just get a really basic arcade flight game where you just knock out a few targets and that's it. You're done with a level. It doesn't really, no one should even really have bothered to convert it at all, especially if they weren't going to put any meat on it. And really, the funniest thing about this conversion, aside from just how weak it is that it does have that title. It's specifically called, on platforms like the Amiga and the Spectrum, G-Loc R360, as if playing it on here was anything like the experience of actually playing G-Loc in the R360 cabinet and going upside down and all of that. Just ridiculous, just completely stupid title and utterly empty game. Double Dragon. I think again the thing with something like Double Dragon is the arcade was so big that the people who kind of were behind this obviously kind of knew that this was going to be a big deal no matter what they put out there, and in the case of this Melbourne House title, the end product is atrocious conversion. Double Dragon is so easy on the Amiga, on the Spectrum as well, let's not forget. Basically, all you just do is kick. You just kick endlessly. Enemies take forever to die, but they can barely get, a hit on you if you just kick right, especially because it's so easy to just get them moving as one. Even the likes of a Bobo pose zero challenge. You just do that. There's no in-game music at all. You get a rather limp version of the stage 1 theme on the main menu screen, and yeah, no music, barely any sound effects. Graphics are just completely off. Horrible conversion. It was a great coup back in the day for Melbourne House, for Mastertronic essentially, to get the Double Dragon IP to be able to do this conversion, but they produced an absolute dog. Dennis, another rather bad Ocean licensed game. This is one that's kind of annoying because Dennis is very much primarily a platform game, so it's a different kettle of fish to the likes of Terminator 2, where it's trying to go all over the shop and just doing nothing right. But it comes from a similar time when Ocean were producing games like Addams Family, Lethal Weapon, which are damn fine efforts when it comes to like licensed game platformers. But then Dennis here is just a complete dog, completely just boring in every way. Boring music, boring typical Euro platformer premise. Just a very dull game. I mean, I don't think this really had much of a chance in the UK market anyway, because a lot of people automatically think, well, this is clearly based on Dennis the Menace, or the US version of Dennis the Menace that's originally based on the Beano comic, although it's actually not based on the Beano comic at all. It's very confusing. It's like Dennis the Menace. There was a UK Dennis the Menace and a US Dennis the Menace that are completely different, not based on each other at all, and were actually made on the same day, believe it or not. At least that's what the stories say anyway. But yeah, this is just a terrible game and got reviewed accordingly. It's just, again, because it's kind of like Hello Hello in that it's the definition of pointless licensed pap. It is not, as some people have said over the years, unbeatable, but it's not exactly a game that you'd ever want to put in too much effort to try and beat. So I can almost see like why a legend like that would come around when it comes to Dennis. Just bad. Alternative Software are here again with another UK TV licensed game, and this one's Dalek Attack. Poor old Doctor Who, as famous as the IP is here in the UK, just couldn't get any decent games, and this one, oh Christ. It starts with an awful tunnel-based shoot-'em-up section with a lot of sound effects rather oddly just ripped straight out of Alien 3 on the Mega Drive. Then gets into your very classic licensed game fluff, similar thing you saw to Hello Hello, where you're just aimlessly trying to get your ass around various settings, trying to rescue people and all of that. Just boring as all hell. Again, it's, a Doctor Who game could clearly have been so much better than this. If there'd have been perhaps something more meaty, more adventure-y than this very standard action platformer thing that's barely above a budget title. I think that's probably one of the main reasons why something like Dalek Attack, especially at the time, reviewed so terribly and is still treated with, quite rightly, utter contempt now. A Doctor Who game could have been so much more, like certainly even back then in 1993 when this came out, and this is all that we got. Very, very disappointing. We've still got a lot of bad arcade conversions, and Power Drift is one that I particularly have no time for. The thing with Power Drift is that, unlike other ones that we've already seen, Power Drift is actually a game that mostly got really good conversions. Power Drift on the ZX Spectrum, Power Drift on the C64, which did often get some really crappy conversions of arcade racers, Power Drift on the Amstrad. 8-bit Power Drift is superb, and you'd think because of that, well, surely 16-bit power drift on the Amiga is going to be even better. And no, it is not. It is so choppy, and the attempt at recreating the scalar graphics of the arcade, because of the choppiness, because of just how this game is, it makes the game look unintelligible. Half of the time when I'm playing Power Drift, whenever you try and go up a slope or anything like that, I have no idea where I even am, and 9 times out of 10 I just end up falling off the course because it's just impossible to really get the track in your head because it's so ugly. And that's a very legit problem. I mean, a lot of times graphics can just be, you know, what on earth is to people's taste. I mean, the graphics in Double Dragon, for example, that we saw a few entries ago, I mean, they're pretty widely considered as an awful take, but at least they don't actually actively interfere with the playing of the game, whereas, well, the ones here do. Ugh, just no good at all. Just what a disappointment. The Amiga could have had such a better version of Power Drift than this. Utter own goal from Activision. Here's another one, Total Carnage. This one from Ice Software. A great coin-oply, spiritual sequel to Smash TV, filled with a lot of the same humour, a lot of the same, you know, big booms and big money, big prizes, all of that. A lot of the same, you know, streak of humour, and you find absolutely none of that here. You just have a utterly soulless bit of drudgery where you go around, virtually no special things to think about here, no special effects to enjoy, just basically firing dots at essentially what seems to be about 2 different enemies from time to time, just coming at you in waves that are always identical. Enemies that can also kill you if you're too close to them, even when you've killed them. No music or anything, and this was released in 1994. This is a late game. I mean, maybe if this had been released in like 1990 or something, it wouldn't be as bad, but this was a late title. Total Carnage was even packed in one of the A1200 packs. It was a packing game. Why on earth it was a packing game, I have no idea, but then such stupid decisions were kind of par for the course when it came to the Amiga in 1994, whether it was Commodore who was responsible for that or ESCOM or whatever. Just no. A big no on this. Absolutely humdrum conversion of an arcade game that's really good and deserves more love. Up next, we get another rather silly TV tie-in. It's Neighbours. It's a game that is quite incomprehensible when you consider the source material. You take this Australian soap opera, and what do? Well, you make this sort of street racing game out of it, where you go around Ramsey Street in your go-kart or soapbox or whatever, avoid various obstacles, and try and get through those cones. It is absolutely nothing like anything that you would expect a Neighbours game to be at all, and it's really bad. Most people have posited, and they're probably correct in saying that the guys who made this game, Impulse, were making some budget racing game, and suddenly the boss came in one day and said, "Hey guys, I've spoken to Grundy and we've got the license for Neighbours. Let's take this game that you're working on and just shove that license on it." And yeah, that's probably what happened here. It's just really stupid, although I suppose considering that EastEnders on the ZX Spectrum exists, it's not the worst tie-in game for a soap opera ever made. Barbarian. Now, this is not the famous game where you lop people's heads off and all of that. This is an early game from Psygnosis. Psygnosis' early games could be questionable because sometimes, like this one, they'd have very silly ideas. This is a action platform type game that you control with the mouse. You have the giant icons at the bottom of the screen, and you click those and try to move your guy about and, well, fail miserably because controlling a platform game with a mouse is, shockingly enough, a terrible idea. This just does not work. Psygnosis took a little while for them, I think, to really get their momentum going. A lot of their early titles just have really stupid ideas like this. This wasn't the only mouse-driven platformer they did. Bratarkus, their first game, was a mouse-controlled adventure, but one done in a really terrible way. You had Obliterator as well, which was a bit better than this in some ways. Barbarian is just one of the weakest games that they ever produced. Peter Beardsley's international football was never going to be too long before we got some sort of sports tie-in, didn't we? Peter Beardsley, the noble footballer, is besmirched by this awful game from Grand Slam. This just comes off like a really cheap and nasty power bar driven version of Ocean's classic Match Day, with graphics that can't even really hope to match even that game's ones on the Spectrums, an absolutely terrible soundtrack, and the computer intelligence is not exactly what it was. I mean, there's been times when I've played this game and the computer just moves around the ball, moves left to right at the ball, but never actually picks it up and goes forward. So yeah, when stuff like that happens, you kind of know what you're dealing with here. Just one of many miserable football times. There's probably a whole load of us more, and we will see a couple more footy games on this list, but this is definitely one that I wanted to pick out because it is crap. Red Heat. This game is both pretty terrible and obviously also quite weird. It's another licensed game, and it's the one where Arnie walks very, very slowly through settings like a bathhouse, best of all in the first level, beating up guys that look like John Rambo, avoiding snowballs, occasionally crushing some stones so he can get some cocaine, and as evidence, obviously, and all sorts of other things like that. And it has a very strange ultra widescreen sort of resolution going on that, again, just looks silly. This is just one of the slowest and most boring beat-em-ups I can think of, honestly. The only real factor here that kind of makes this game come relatively low on the list is just because of how silly it is, especially when you consider the settings or the James Belushi who looks like frickin' his mouth moves like he's bloody Gabbo. It's a daft game. Another licensed game follows straight after, Batman Returns. On the main, this one is just so disappointing. Early previews in magazines suggested that the Amiga was going to get a Batman Returns game like the one that was on PC, the pretty nifty point-and-click game. That was not what happened. We instead got, again, another very basic beat-em-up, also with some platforming things going on that just doesn't work out. It is a cheap and miserable tie-in. Sadly, it is also the last game produced by the almighty Denton Designs, and it's a rather ignominious finish to that great UK studio, the guys behind the likes of Frankie Goes to Hollywood and The Great Escape and Where Time Stood Still and all of that. Not exactly what was ordered, and not exactly what Amiga fans expected, or indeed wanted. Gadget Lost in Time. This is an obscure one. This is a game where the studio, the license, this is sponsored by the frickin' Daily Telegraph. Well, not sponsored, but made by the Young Telegraph Studio or whatever. So, yeah, that immediately drops the cool level of this game down to absolutely miserable levels. And then the game itself is, basically, it's a kind of kiddies platformer, but a rather poor one. The controls, the jump is so floaty, the hero just looks phenomenally stupid even by Amiga standards, and most of the game involves trying to answer various questions here and there. Almost comes off like an Awesome Possum type game. It's probably not the worst platformer game ever made. Hell, it's not even the worst game on this list that has a newspaper connected with it, believe it or not. But it is pretty atrocious. Surf Ninjas. Again, some games don't get as high a position as perhaps you might reckon they should just because they are so funny, almost so bad it's good. And Surf Ninjas is one of those. This was a port, I suppose, of a game that was originally by Capstone for the PC, based on the movie. Flare Software, the guys who did this, you can kind of tell they really did not give two hoots about Surf Ninjas. You have a hero that looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger. You have various hemmed-in references to other Flare Software games, such as Soccer Boss, and you also have, rather infamously, the move where Arnold can rip out a guy's spine, which is something that you definitely wouldn't expect to see in a game that's a tie-in for a kids' movie. So yeah, oh, and also there's about half the game here, it just ends. I mean, the PC Surf Ninjas game is not exactly a classic to begin with, but this Amiga version is, it's just kind of a bit of a joke. It's quite an amusing joke in some places, but it is a pretty naff game. Huckleberry Hound in Hollywood Capers. One of many games that tie in with Hanna-Barbera related products, and one of many games that also kind of takes a leaf out of the big old Rainbow Islands book. Rainbow Islands was massively popular over here in the UK and Europe, perhaps more so than it was in other territories, so you did get a lot of games ripping it off, and this one, alongside Ed the Duck, which just didn't really make this list, is one of the worst of them. The main thing is just the complete lack of animation. Huckleberry Hound's jumping is just essentially rotating his walking sprite. It's easy to get knocked off, it's easy to just... You almost have to feel like you have to break the game in order to progress at points. It's not good at all. The only probably reason why this is not higher is because there's a much worse Rainbow Islands knockoff to come that makes this one look like it's freaking, well, Rainbow Islands. But we will get to that eventually, I can assure you. Bad Cat. Now, Rainbow Arts. Rainbow Arts is a curious case. A famous studio, loved for the likes of Turrican in particular. But the early history of Rainbow Arts in particular, you do find a few really lousy games knocking about, and they are games that will feature in this list. Bad Cat here is the first of them. This is kind of a weird athletics sort of game. You go through these different screens and you have various challenges. It kind of almost feels like this cat's going through some sort of gladiators type thing. Maybe the Krypton Factor Assault course? I don't know. The main thing about it is the jumping and the collision detection is just so annoying. You have to be incredibly precise with all your movements, otherwise your feline hero, I don't know if you can really call him that, seeing as he's supposed to be bad, will just slip off whatever platform is on and you'll have to do the screen again and again, over and over. Controls are annoyingly obtuse. It just feels like a really terrible version, I guess in particular gaming-wise, of something like Konami's Combat School. Just doesn't work at all. Livingstone 2. Now, I've never played Livingstone 1, but I do hope it's better than this sequel. This is a Spanish game, and it's a Spanish game with what, in theory, seems like quite a nice idea. It's kind of an Indiana Jones-esque type of thing where presumably you're playing as Stanley, I guess. Maybe you're in the search for Livingstone. I'm not exactly sure of the plot, I have to admit. You do have various tools at your disposal. You've got a whip, you've got a pole vault type thing that you can use to jump very high, you've got some bombs, and all of that you can use in various different contexts. And that seems great, but the technical quality of this game is shocking. I mean, this is a game where you literally have to press the enter button to turn. And I say turn, it just flips your sprite, right, with no animation at all. Really very, very poorly done. And just the initial puzzles and things that you have to do are often just so frustrating that by the time you even think that you've made even the slightest scintilla of progress, you're probably going to have lost all of your lives. It's one of those classic European games where you start the game with, I think, 10 lives as opposed to the usual 3, but I guess kind of the reason that you start with 10 lives is because everything is so unfair, so unnecessarily difficult that those lives are not going to last you any amount of time at all. Just awful. Back to the Future Part 3. Oh dear. Another licensed game, one that's kind of a procession of mini games, although a lot of people will probably not get past the first one where you got Doc Brown on a horse and poor old Clara Clayton ends up going off that cliff over and over again because it's essentially a turbo tunnel where you have to memorise everything. You have to memorise just when to duck, when to jump, because if you don't, it all just comes at you so fast that you can't do a damn thing. If you are lucky enough or unlucky enough to get past this, there's other things. There's a shooting gallery, there's a pie fight, there's some bit where you want to train. I mean, I've personally never been able to manage to beat the first part of this game where you're on the freaking horse, so I've never even seen the other bits. I don't know how bad they are. They can't be any worse than this, I'm sure. Ugh. So here's the other game on this list that has newspaper sponsorship, Snapperazzi. This is a game made by Alternative Software with the help of some two-person studio or whatever, and the main sponsor here is The Sun. The Sun sponsored this one. This is an absolutely abysmal looking game, one of those where we just go really all out on cheap graphical effects, where you have to you have to find page 3 models and take pictures of them. There's no nudity or anything like that. I don't have to break out the old John Savardon or rate my takeaway or anything, but ugh. And you have to take pictures of other things as well, but it's also just one of those games that's pretty unclear in what you have to do. Like, you seemingly just die in this game for no reason. You're just going about. There's some weird system, I think, that involves money and things that look like they're something that you should pick up or take a snapshot of, but you really shouldn't. And the game moves in such a way that it ends up being hard to avoid them. So it basically becomes nothing but rote memorization, which is just the least fun gameplay in the world. Oh dear, dear, dear. This is rightly a very obscure game. I think whatever few reviews of it were unsurprisingly very negative, and it's certainly not one that has any charm to play now. Certainly didn't Len either. Orphan Dentures. This one is just kind of a sad case. I mean, whenever I've seen this game, it just gets ripped to oblivion, usually because the poor sod got released in the early mid-90s, like in budget form, when it should have just been left to have a nice place in history. There was a time when Orphan Dentures was the best thing going when it comes to the NFL, when it comes to American football, at least on computers. It had its moments, mostly on 8-bit platforms. Here on the Amiga, it's just won't do. It has a very, unfriendly, I think to say the least, control system, menu system. You then get in the game and it's hard to even know what you're even playing as, what one of the identical guys in helmets you are. Just no, it's just not fun anymore. This is a game that was basically raised completely out of existence by the arrival of John Madden Football. And then when it was released later on budget labels, that's when the real knives came out for it. And so it ends up with a place on the list. Paradise Lost. This is quite an obscure one indeed, and it's one that, when you boot it up, you almost think like this might have some promise. It's got a nice long intro, some nice graphics and all that. It looks like you're going to have some good time. It looks like a high concept thing, you know, one perhaps based on the classic John Milton poem. Then you play it, and what you actually have is a Temu version of Shadow of the Beast. And Shadow of the Beast itself, the original, was a bit dodgy itself on the gameplay front, but this is far worse, and it doesn't exactly have the graphics to help it along either. Just go forward, punch people, collision detection that's dodgy in the extreme. Ugh, dear. I mean, after that intro, you expect something different than this, and then the actual result is just so disappointing. I say disappointing, but this is a game that probably very few people have played, but having played it for when I did the old big Amiga Euro platform wheel, I definitely kind of knew that at some stage or another it was going to end up on a list like this one. We are now getting into the top, or should we say bottom 50, and here we have one of the worst, not just one of the worst, but again, one of the most disappointing conversions of an arcade game that I can think of for the Amiga. Renegade. The thing with Renegade, when you look at the 8-bit conversions of Renegade, very specifically the ZX Spectrum one, you've got something absolutely fantastic there. Brilliant conversion. The graphics look pretty good for the system, and the gameplay is right there. It plays like Renegade. And you expect that a 16-bit version of it, especially with Software Creations at the helm of it, you think it's going to be a really good time, and then, oh, it just is not. The gameplay is just not there. The graphics look really amateurish. Even the music, and it is Tim Follin on the music, is also just very disappointing. I mean, I'd rather play one of the many Renegade rip-offs that are kicking around as opposed to this one. I'd rather play freaking Street Vigilante by Players, I believe that was. And that's no good either, but it's better than this awful conversion. Just a real shocker from folks who you could normally count on being better than this. A shame. Hollywood Hustler. I think Hollywood Hustler merits a place on a list like this, not necessarily for the game itself, but for what it represents, the whole context and all of that. The game itself, aside from its lengthy intro and its rather silly cutscenes and all of that, is just a very bog-standard poker title. Bog-standard 5-card draw. No different from many other releases, both commercial releases and public domain ones. But then, of course, you have the whole other thing. You have how the game was promoted as being a completely new step in interactive gaming. You have it being so prominent in the zombie version of the one, the Maverick edition, where it got rave reviews and was eventually just shoved on there for free, considering that a couple of months before it was shoved on the one's front cover for free. It was a full-price game. I mean, I doubt it was one that many people bought, but it was still a full-price game. And again, just under the hood here, all you have is bog-standard poker. And there were hundreds, if not, well, maybe not thousands, but certainly hundreds of basic card games available for next to nothing from any PD out that you can care to name. So this is just... It feels like a confidence trick, I think it's fair to say. Stupid, stupid way of promoting a game.
Check. 3.
Similarly to Fourth and Inches, Anko's Flight Path 737 is a game that, at one point, and that point was back in the early mid-80s, did have something. A C64 game originally, a flight simulator type game. Certainly if you look at that version even of the game, it's not exactly anything good to play now. But I can suppose that back when it was originally released in 1984, I want to say, it had something, because there weren't that many other flight simulators about. It had no business being on the Amiga at all, and again, like Fourth and Inches, it certainly had no business getting plenty of re-releases on budget labels. Even for a fiver, it was too much in 1993 or whatever to pay for a game like this when there were so many other better flight simulators available, probably even for a similar price. It just, I mean, you can just tell by how it looks. I mean, it's not even got the 3D aspect that other flight simulators have. It's just a very early game and just one that gets shown up hideously when you play it now. And I imagine it got shown up even more hideously when you played it back then, even if you got it for a few quid. It's hard to even judge where you're going. You just end up crashing on the runway 99 times out of 100, and even if you can get it in the sky, you're treated to sights that essentially look like someone smeared horse dung over your screen. Not very pleasant. Oh dear. I mean, there are many bad arcade conversions on the Amiga. A few of which merited being in this list, but there might not be one that's any worse than Victory Road. I mean, SNK's original arcade of Victory Road is not a classic, let's face it. It's a pretty poor take on the whole Ikari Warriors thing, and generally is something best forgotten. But this conversion of it, I mean, this is more than just the bog standard thing of saying, oh, it's exactly the same like it was on the Atari ST and other lazy things like that. This is shocking on any platform. It's incredibly yellow for a start. The controls, it feels like a broken Spectrum game. The soundtrack, completely off the wall. You end up soon enough in parts where you don't know where you have to go next, which is weird considering that this is just a top-down shooter. Before that, you'll probably end up getting killed by things that are utterly invisible. It's just, in every single way that you can fathom, this game is broken. I mean, when you tell people about the process of converting games to microcomputers, when you say that, well, it's not like they had the original code of the arcade machine to work on, it's not a port. Basically, they had to play the arcade machine themselves and make their own interpretation of what was going on. Some people would probably think, geez, in those conditions, all games would come out like this one. Which is obviously not the case. There have been many a classic. But this, this is the exact opposite of anything like that. Just the most awful, one of the most awful attempts at converting an arcade that I can think of. A complete piece of shit. Psycho Killer, the legendarily stupid game from online. Now, I must confess, I've never played The Town with No Name. I mean, there are probably many people who say that, well, as far as online games go, that kind of attempt at Western should have a place on this list, but Psycho Killer is one that I have played, and I definitely want to put it here. It's just, again, it's so daft. You've got really rather weak voice acting that basically is the only thing that's really interesting about a game that's little but still photographs. Just still photographs where you're going around British fields trying not to get whacked by this guy who you've seen dragging a woman into God knows where. It's just, yeah. It's trying to have some sort of suspense going about it, maybe even trying to be a bit of a horror title, but like most of online CDTV games, I guess at the time when this was released, they were trying to do something, and some people who did end up having pretty damn big pedigrees, who I can't quite remember the name of right now, sorry, did work on a lot of this online stuff. Like, some of the guys who did make this did go on to greater things. But yeah, when you look at Psycho Killer, especially nowadays, yeah. Not held up, I think is fair to say.
Ouch. Thorns. Oh, I'm not going to get through here.
Graham Souness Vector Soccer. I think the thing about this game is that the idea itself is fine. I mean, it's a 3D soccer game. It's just, well, it's far too early for such a thing, and the hardware is not there at all. So what you end up with is some, well, not detailed at all, polygons moving around, all flat shaded, very, very slowly on the pitch, and the gameplay is just, well, it's almost unplayable. I kind of almost respect it more than a couple of other soccer games, just based on the idea of it and actually trying to do a 3D game like this at such an early stage. That's like a sports game, a football game, I suppose, rather than a soccer game, seeing as we're in England. But no, it was a few years more before we could actually get something like this that was playable, and certainly not on the Amiga. Ed the Duck 2, Back with a Quack. Both Ed the Duck games could have probably been on this list. I mean, the first one isn't exactly a whole lot of good either, being another Rainbow Islands type game that's poorly executed. But I don't know, this second one, a more standard side-on platformer, horizontal one, is just awful. Again, it's just another really bad license. I mean, Ed the Duck was a perfectly fine character on TV back in the days. It's not like this is as weird a license as, say, Mr. Blobby is, but Mr. Blobby is a much better game than this one. The most annoying thing about this one, I find, the most illogical of its many typical Euro platformer tropes, is that this guy, who is a duck, if he touches even the slightest bit of water, he dies. And I don't know, even if Ed the Duck might be a puppet and not a real duck, that still kind of strikes me as very stupid indeed. And aside from that, again, this is just another Euro platformer, one of many that just feels like a castaway from the 8-bit days. It really doesn't feel like anything you'd ever want to play on an Amiga at any point. Yuck. Speaking of which, here's another one that's kind of on a similar level. Sooty and Sweep. Oh dear. The most annoying short musical loop. And again, just a game that feels so out of it. So 8-bit. I mean, it wasn't even that good on the 8-bits, let's face it. But on the 16-bits especially, it's amazingly even uglier. And even more just annoying to just go around this house trying to collect various trinkets, various bones, if I remember rightly, that you need to then give to Sue, who's just hanging out on every screen. It's just unbearably flat. I mean, Sooty and Sweep again, it's like, if you were going to make a licensed game out of it, surely you could have come up with something that's more exciting, just more worthwhile than this. It's just a waste of time. We seem to go up a bit of a level with this next entry, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. TierTechs are responsible for many pretty awful games, a couple of good ones as well, mainly in the Olympics genre. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is undoubtedly one of their worst. This is just... I mean, there's so many baffling things about it. Again, Indiana Jones, the great explorer, if he even touches the slightest bit of water, that's him dead. You get a whip, but you can only use a whip a limited amount of times. I mean, somehow I guess the whip breaks after you use it 6 times or so. And again, it's just ridiculously hard and poorly designed. I mean, I've basically never been able to get past the first stage of this, where you're going around and collecting the Cross of Coronado. I suppose one of the only things about this particular Amiga version of the game, as opposed to other console versions of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, is that at least Tiertex in this first level actually bothered to make the character look slightly like young Indiana Jones. Most versions of this game don't even bother to do that, which shows you just how much care and attention Tiertex put into this license. They just have adult Indiana Jones collecting the Cross of Coronado. Either way, whether it's young Indiana Jones or adult Indiana Jones, it's still a terrible, terrible game. One of the more famous, or infamous rather, bad games that's on the Amiga, as well as basically every other platform going on at this time. Gotta have Rise of the Robots on here. Of course, Rise of the Robots is infamous. I've done a whole video on it. It's featured many, many times. The Amiga version is not the worst version of Rise of the Robots, not when compared to the Game Gear version. It's still bad. It comes on many, many, many discs, most of which are dedicated to the admittedly nice intro, but still lots of disc swapping. And then, of course, when you finally get into action, it's one of the most simplistic fighting games that you'll find. A game where it's very easy to just find a move that you can spam repeatedly and defeat everybody with. And again, I think one of the main things especially about this is when you consider just how hyped Rise of the Robots was for a whole year or more before it finally got out there and disappointed everybody. That especially is why it almost has to feature on a list like this, even if there are undoubtedly other fighting games that are far worse than Rise of the Robots. We start the top 40 with another pile of licensed twaddle, Cliffhanger. Now, there isn't really such thing as a good cliffhanger game. I mean, the film itself, let's face it, wasn't a huge amount of cop, but this particular Amiga platformer is boring beyond belief. I mean, it's essentially just a regular old platform game set in snowy surroundings, and you've mainly got wild animals attacking you as opposed to actual people, which, yeah, I'm not sure if I recall in the film any stage where John Lithgow commandeered the animals to attack Sly Stallone's character. I don't think I recall that from the movie. It's just slow and cheap, incredibly cheap, and filled with virtually perfect jumping from the get-go. Just a very, very, very horrible little title. Here's one that's... Geez, if you know this game, then it's something that you will never forget. You will never forget Kung Fu. Kung Fu is not just a game that's bad, but it's a game that's quite unsettling in the way it's done, much like a game that we're going to see later on in the list, that you might know what I'm talking about. It's a platformer title, and if you can actually get it to load, which is not necessarily the easiest thing, because 9 times out of 10 you'll probably run into an out-of-memory error, you'll be greeted with a platformer where things just seem to get thrown about at random. Everything just seems completely out of whack, like it's operating on a different wavelength from the rest of actual humanity. Perhaps there's no better expression of this than when you actually die in the game, you actually get the game over, you get a kangaroo skeleton. I mean, that's certainly a game over and a half. That's like, what on earth? Like, you've got an actual picture of a kangaroo skeleton as your game over. The only reason why Kung Fu isn't any higher than number 39, if I'm honest, is that the game does have, unlike a lot of games here, legitimately excellent music. Kung Fu, of all games, has a superb soundtrack. That's kind of the only reason why it doesn't place higher. It's certainly, for that reason, a lot less in the list than a certain game that's got a fruit in the title that we will be seeing later. But aside from that, the whole thing's awful. Another dreadful conversion, and this time it's not an arcade conversion, it's a console conversion. It's Castlevania. This was, I believe this was a title mainly released in America, and it's kind of weird. I mean, there is an 8-bit C64 version of Castlevania that's actually not that awful, believe it or not, but this 16-bit one, which I believe is by the same people, hopeless, absolutely hopeless. Juddery movement beyond belief. Getting the controls of Castlevania down to one button, of course with infamous up to jump in play, again doesn't really work out as well. All the sprites are just so poorly done, they just look nothing whatsoever like their NES counterparts. I mean, I think, if I remember rightly, there is a recent project that's actually aiming to get a proper version of Castlevania onto the NES, and there's another NES conversion that's coming here that's even worse than this for similar reasons. But this original version, everything's just wrong. Even the selection of music is wrong. None of the actual stage themes correspond to the stages that they're actually supposed to be soundtracking. Everything is just completely screwed up. It is Castlevania, but not as you know it, and certainly not as you want to know it. Here we have another game of Spanish origin, Freddy Hardest in South Manhattan. You might know this game as Guardian Angel because it was re-released as a budget title by Codemasters under that name. Either way, whether you're playing Freddy Hardest in South Manhattan or Guardian Angel, you've got essentially a completely poor man's version of Vigilante. Walk forward, punch, kick. It's one of those games where, again, you'll probably find it tricky to reach the end because you don't exactly get much in the way of lives or credits, and any fight with an enemy will end up with your bar of health being taken down just a little bit here, with very little you can actually do about that, and then eventually you'll just die and feel like you've wasted your time completely. So essentially, if you want to actually complete this game, you've just got to bash your head against the wall, bash it over and over again, and then in the end just probably be a bit lucky as well. It's absolute drudgery. Slow moving, bog standard, terrible beat 'em up drudgery. No excitement, no nothing. Oh dear, more bad football games afoot. Kenny Dalglish soccer match. Kenny Dalglish soccer match. I mean, almost any football of any prominence from this era seems to get some sort of licensed game kicking around here, and this is a particularly unacceptable one. I mean, the thing with a lot of football games is that, in most cases, unless people actually know football games, it can kind of be hard to express easily how this one is a particularly bad one. But I think in the case of particularly grim ones like this one, I would hope that it would be obvious in how this looks. And of course, perhaps the funniest thing about this is that you do get incredibly obvious advice from Kenny Dalglish. You get it before every game, you get it in the middle of any half. It's like, Kenny says, put the ball in the goal. Kenny says, don't forget that this half's going to be 45 minutes long. Kenny says, there's a referee on the pitch, watch out for him. Okay, it might not be as obvious as all of this, but it's still just like, why? I mean, that and the rather silly looking picture of the man himself are the only things that are even there to make it look like there's some actual real person involved in this. The rest of it is just nothing even remotely like football, even by the standards of early 90s Amiga. Lord. As you might expect, they certainly do not get any better. Here's Nightwalk. Nightwalk is a particularly dreadful Ghouls and Ghosts clone from alternative software, one that was many moons ago covered by Ashens in his legendary Terrible Old Games You've Probably Never Heard Of series, and this certainly is a terrible game, in very close running with another game that we'll be seeing later for being the weakest Ghouls and Ghosts clone on the system. Again, just like so many other games, just like Freddy Hardest, in fact this one is even slower than Freddy Hardest. This makes Freddy Hardest look like Usain Bolt. You can just control this guy on a flat background, looks like it was all done by a kid. He fires arrows, but he fires arrows so slowly that it's almost impossible to... You have to be lucky. It feels like you have to break the game in order to get anywhere, because when the guy fires arrows, if memory serves me right, he's actually invincible. So if you kind of keep spamming that, then that's a legitimate way of getting past enemies, which really does not feel right. Like, it feels like something that's broken. I mean, games of a European origin have often been, in cliched fashion, described as ones that have troubles with collision detection, but this one takes the piss. Yeah, I mean, even by the standards of alternative software's budget releases, even by the standards of 8-bit games like BMX Ninja, this one is right down there for them. Atrocious. Now, certainly when it came to the later days of the Amiga, I do remember there was a lot of talk on, will we ever get Doom? Or, what games are out there that are even kind of like Doom? There was so much talk of that. And some efforts in that front were noble. And then, on the other hand, you have something like Behind the Iron Gate. Behind the Iron Gate is a Doom clone, a Wolfie 3D clone that's designed to kind of run on any Amiga. Like, this isn't just an ARGA title, but, oh my word, it is a sight. I mean, it's all plain, just no textures whatsoever, flat shaded, all the same colour. It's hard to know just where you're even going. And even then, when you do know where you're going, the controls are so obscure that it's hard to even get into a position where you can kill an enemy, where you can even pick up items. It's just sad. I don't even necessarily... I mean, because obviously people were trying. They were trying to get some sort of intense first-person action on the Amiga, but in this late stage of the computer's commercial life, it just really wasn't happening, and Behind the Iron Gate is one of the poorest examples of that I can think of. Just, it's sad to see. I don't even want to dog on the people who made it that much, like so many other titles here. They were trying, but just wasn't happening. But I can certainly dog on the folks who made WWF European Rampage Tour. Now, Ocean's WrestleMania game, which is kind of very loosely based off of Technos' WWF Superstars, that wasn't particularly good either, but it's a lot better than this. Again, it's kind of a similar theme, although the concept here is mainly based around tag team wrestling. You pick who you want the team to be made out of, whether it's, Hogan and Warrior, Savage and Hogan, Savage and Brett. And then you've faced various other teams. You've faced the likes of the Nasty Boys and Money Inc. and the Natural Disasters. This is a game, the attention paid to wrestling is made clear by the fact that opponents can be pinned in this game when they're laying on their stomach. Well, the teams that you're facing, they usually they're not even named right. Like, if you know wrestling, when you're facing the Nasty Boys, Knobs is Sags, and Sags is called Knobs. And just little things like that, along with the general horrid quality of the game itself. Yeah, this is one of the worst wrestling games I can think of. There's really not many wrestling games, in fact, I would say are worse than WWF European Rampage. Although there is another one coming up on this list. Now, if you thought that Freddy Hardest in South Manhattan was an awful clone of games like Vigilante and that, Street Gang, another level beyond. Again, it's an early game from Rainbow Arts, and as much as Rainbow Arts are known primarily for good stuff, when they sucked, oh boy, they absolutely friggin' sucked. It all feels, again, it's one of those games where the sprites are just so poorly drawn, it just looks awful. Like, there's no, it's like a child's drawing, and I don't think that's like the vibe that they were going for, it's just how bad it is. Look utterly nasty, and you know, it's supposed to be a 16-bit platform, and you've got something here that wouldn't pass the bar even on an 8-bit, even on a friggin' 16K machine maybe, you know. And when you top it off with the poor controls and the juddery movement of it all, yeah, no good. Doofus, on the other hand. Now, Doofus doesn't have that. The graphics in Doofus, perhaps compared to other games on this list, are nice. But then when you actually play it, the whole thing is hideously broken. It's a Euro platformer, but a Euro platformer that's almost like an escort mission where you are controlling this rather ugly looking kid and his dog is behind you. And the most annoying thing about that, it's kind of like Flicky. Like, if you remember the arcade game Flicky, if you have chirpy birds behind you, and it's easy for them to get touched by an enemy. Now in Flicky, all that means is you've just got to go and retrieve them. If that happens to the dog, who's always jumping, you know, a second or so behind you, it just means you die. And it's so easy for that to happen over and over. You've got to get, even the simplest looking jumps, you have to get absolutely dead right in this game. And that whole mechanic is beyond frustrating. Just getting anywhere in this game is a task in itself. And this was a full price title. I mean, a lot of the games that we've seen are budget releases. This was a full price title. This was something that you had to spend like 30 quid or more on back in the day. So paying that for a game like this it's no wonder that this got particularly miserable scores in magazines like Amiga Power, because no, just no. Another completely baffling licensed game comes up. The Flintstones. This is one from Grand Slam. The Flintstones. Now, there actually have been quite a few very good Flintstones games released over the years. Perfectly acceptable platformers on the 8-bits and the 16-bits. Even the Flintstones movie has some okay tie-ins. But this, the first tie-in of the Flintstones, I'm pretty sure, is a whole level behind those, several levels behind them. This is one that's, again, mostly mini-games. The first and most frustrating of which is the one where you have to paint the wall of your house while Pebbles runs around, scribbling on everything. You have to endlessly refill your paintbrush, and the music is just the worst possible version, a really slow version of the Flintstones theme. And just even doing little things like moving the ladder about. I mean, I know that there's a certain strategy to it, but just the whole thing, like, what do you do in this game? You paint. Now, nowadays, there's probably fairly few simulator games out there that actually make painting things fun. This certainly does not make painting walls fun. It makes it a chore. Get past that, you get a terrible driving sort of section, you get a terrible bowling game with Barney, and then I think there's some Rainbow Islands-esque platforming to finish. All terrible, but yeah, I think something like, the first level of game is, paint this wall before you go bowling, Fred. That's very classically typical of the shitest of licensed games in what you actually have to do. It's like this, you had the Flintstones as a license, and this was the best you could come up with. Last Action Hero. Basically, all the licensed games for this particular film are quite terrible, whether it's Mega Drive or SNES or NES or whatever. But the Amiga version really does take the win here. This is one of the most lame excuses for a beat-em-up I can think of, and it's amazing that it's got the Psygnosis name on it. I mean, the beat-em-up action almost does seem typical when you look at it, but then you see the really stupid movements that Jack Slater has, whether it's when he's trying to do headbutts and it looks like he's headbanging to a Slayer song, the stupid somersault kick that you may accidentally do a few times and take off most of your life doing it, the roundhouse kicks, and all of these are just the moves that you can use against an endlessly monotonous parade of villains and thugs and ne'er-do-wells that you essentially just spam the move over and over, just hold the buttons down, hold the button and the direction down, and one certain move will basically destroy 99% of the enemies in the game. And that's it, you just repeat that forever and ever until at some point you eventually win the whole thing. The soundtrack isn't even particularly good either, it's incredibly shrill, one of the shrillest examples of trying to make some sort of like loud rock music to soundtrack a beat 'em up that I can think of. A very, very weak tie-in indeed. I mean, there's a lot of games like this on the list, but you certainly know that we're getting to the business end when we see this one come up. All Dogs Go to Heaven. It's another licensed game. So many bad ones on the Amiga. This is one for the, the rather sad Don Bluth film. And again, it's a collection of barely understandable minigames. There's a racing one, there's, I think, one where you have to collect some rings or whatever. The soundtrack, oh my goodness, the soundtrack. I mean, it's not quite as horrifying as the DOS version of the game where you get digitized noises played through the PC speaker and it's completely unlistenable, but it's not far off. The gameplay, the slowness and judderiness of everything, it's just, my goodness. I mean, Don Bluth and video games do certainly have a colourful history, and a very good history when it comes to that when you think of Dragon's Lair and so on, but as far as Don Bluth and video games go, I would have to say that this is the nadir by a long distance.
Guessing what's coming, let me be surprised. Today there's sun, they said there'd be snow when all said.
We have another game here that's most certainly an 8-bit title, and one that's got a terrible 16-bit conversion. This is Oberon 69. I believe that this is another game of Spanish origin. There's some things about this title that you might think have some potential, whether it's, having your hero display at least a bit of character throughout by all the talking that he does. But then the game is just the worst kind of 8-bit European shoot-'em-up action platformer. One where enemies just come in absolutely at random and they just swarm you. If you hang around for any length of time, you are going to be destroyed in seconds flat. You just, essentially, you just don't even bother trying to engage with the enemies. You just run from them. Run, run and run. Try and get through the maze that makes up the brunt of the game as fast as possible. But eventually, in all likelihood, you are probably going to cop it, because there's just nothing you can do about what feels like just hundreds of enemies filling up the entire screen that are all out to get you, and the firepower that your character possesses is utterly useless in comparison. Just stupidly unfair, graphically awful. Yeah, not good in the slightest. We've got some really infamous bad games coming up, and Human Killing Machine is here with more misery from the Tiertex front. So Tiertex's Amiga port of Street Fighter, the original one, was bad enough. It wasn't particularly good at all on Amiga, it wasn't really particularly good on any platform. But then Tiertex obviously decided to take this conversion of Street Fighter and make their own original game out of it, and they came up with the Human Killing Machine, which in all areas is far, far worse than said Street Fighter conversion. I mean, For the most part, unless you find, you know, whatever lucky move you can use to defeat the enemies, you probably won't even get past the first stage. Basically, the only move that you can really do with any effect is a low kick. That's all you can do. You just spam that and hope for the best. It is appallingly slow. It's stupidly unfair in the sense that you can only take a couple of knockdowns as Quan, and you have to basically knock down every enemy about 5 times, just repeating the same thing over and over just to get past them, which is frankly a ridiculous way of lengthening the game out to even more unnecessary proportions. As far as fighting games go, again, I mean, there are other versions of Human Killing Machine on other platforms. There's even 8-bit versions of it, as I recall, that are also terrible, but on the Amiga in particular, this one really takes the piss. And here we have Akira. It's almost kind of weird if you think about it that Akira, for such a famous name, has so few tie-in games, and probably one of the biggest ones, one of the ones that actually got released, was for, of all platforms, the frickin' Amiga, and it's horrid. You get 2 different types of gameplay here. You get the portion where you play as Kaneda, which, again, you're not necessarily likely to get past because you start the first stage with what is basically a turbo tunnel where it's very easy to die and you basically have to be perfect. And if you do manage to get through that, or if you use a level select or whatever to get through that, you have some rather lousy maze-type stages where you're playing as Tetsuo. And that's it. These 2 forms of gameplay just repeat over and over until inevitably you reach the finish, if you can be bothered to do that. Again, I mean, the Tetsuo stages are better, I suppose, than the Kaneda stages, but the Kaneda stages are so horrible, and you're so unlikely to get past them unless you, for whatever reason, spend hours and hours learning the one and single way that you can get through these goddamn turbo tunnel stages, that in all likelihood you're just never going to see the stuff with Tetsuo anyway. Absolutely hideous. Jet Set Willy 2. How to utterly ruin a classic game. Basically, what happened here is that the people who made this 16-bit version of Jet Set Willy thought that it would be best improved by graphics that are nowhere near as memorable as what you'd find in the original. It scrolls as well, which seems like a better thing at first than having flip screen, but considering how Jet Set Willy works, it means that you just get completely stages of screens that are completely unconnected to each other. It's really buggy, has hideous music all over it. It's just an awful conversion of a classic game. There's no reason at all why you should play this over the original. It's certainly not improved by not being flip screen. If anything, it's just far, far worse. It almost exposes like any single possible fault that Jet Set Willy could have. Just a real shame to see. Yet another bad licensed game is here. It's The Running Man from Grand Slam. We've had quite a few Arnie Tynes on this list. We've had Red Heat, we've had Last Action Hero, but The Running Man is the worst of them. It's kind of the most boring of them as well in many ways, in that it's just a plain old side-scrolling game. But even then, once you get past the intro, any little thing that you have to do, aside from walking forward, is a nightmare. Just what appear to be the most basic looking of jumps when you see them are actually horrendous to try and get through with the way that Arnold, or Ben Richards in this case, jumps. You just end up slipping off platforms endlessly or just not making them. It's a mission just to get to the first fight against Sub-Zero. When you actually get to those stalkers, they're not exactly the hardest of enemies to take out, but even when you beat them, chances are you'll have lost so many lives that you'll end up getting taken out by a dog or something like that before you can even finish the stage. There are other little bits. There's sections where you have to input a code, almost like the typical puzzle things that get introduced into licensed games around this time, largely thanks to what Ocean did with games like RoboCop and Batman. But as you can expect, they were implemented much worse here. Awful soundtrack, graphics absolutely terrible to look at, useless in every way. Here's another funny one from Rainbow Arts. Now, Rainbow Arts are kind of, especially early Rainbow Arts, are kind of infamous for the Great Giana Sisters, the game that was a complete rip-off of Super Mario Bros. This is something a bit more obscure, Thunder Boy, which is a complete rip-off of Wonder Boy by Sega. This one, I guess, kind of fell under the radar because, as far as I can tell, Sega didn't sue, or West One didn't sue over this or anything. But yes, this is just Wonder Boy, and it's an awful, juddery, terribly controlling version of Wonder Boy. All the charm, all the, speedy gameplay that you would find in the original Wonder Boy, you will find none of that whatsoever here. It's just, just looking at it, it's like, God, basically any version of the original Wonder Boy is better than this. I'd rather play Wonder Boy on the Spectrum or the C64 Amstrad or anything than this terrible rip-off. I think this is even by the exact same people who did Great Giana Sisters too, funnily enough. It's like they did that and then I guess they didn't necessarily learn their lesson. We're almost at the top 20 and we've got another rip-off game here. We've got Caverns of Palais. Now, this could be one of several games from the mind of a rather interesting figure by the name of Carl Hodgetts, a guy from Oceania, from New Zealand, I believe it is, who made various games for the Amiga and a couple of arcade games as well that were essentially really bad clones, using various assets from arcade games such as Rygar in the main, Black Tiger, Ghosts and Goblins, all that sort of thing. Pretty much all of them are very similar to Caverns of Palais. You've got Aztec Warrior is another one. And I don't know, something about this one, I guess, stands out a bit more than the others if I was going to pick any of the various rather awful games that Carl Hodgetts did for the Amiga. He's a very interesting person. He actually ended up going into doing heart medication or something like that, some sort of heart medication of all things from video games. So, yeah, an interesting person, but dreadful, dreadful games. We are starting to get to the real elite of bad conversions, the Amiga version of Battletoads. We've already had one game that came from the NES in the shape of Castlevania that was bad enough. This version of Battletoads, though, is a whole other step. Again, it's just a case where you wouldn't necessarily think it would be hard. I mean, the NES has got 2 buttons, the Amiga has got 1. You'd have thought, well, surely it wouldn't be too hard to get that sort of thing neatly transferred over, neatly converted and interpreted onto an Amiga. But turns out it is. It's all over the shop. I mean, the way that you jump, the way that you attack, it's completely nonsensical. And again, it's a game that you're not even likely to get that far in. There's one jump in particular, because the collision detection is so off, right near the start, that feels almost impossible. And the way that the controls are, like these stupid, illogical steps that you have to take just to jump, just to even really hit enemies all that well, you're not even likely to get to the first boss. You're barely likely to get to that aforementioned jump. And this was a conversion that came out fairly late on and was obviously being sold at full price. It's a misery. Another terrible sports game is here, and this one is European Champions. There's actually 2 football games named European Champions. One is a perfectly acceptable title from Ocean, And then there's this, which is one of the worst sensible soccer clones I can think of. I mean, a game like Kickoff 96 always tends to get talked up, perhaps mainly because Amiga Power gave it that infamous rating of 1% back in their final issue, but this is so much worse. This is a game where, like the worst sort of football game, all you really do is you just run in a straight line. You run in a straight line, you hit the ball directly at your opposing goalkeeper, and a lot of the time you'll just score even though you've hit it straight at the keeper because the AI is so utterly dumb that they'll just move out the way of the ball. It is ridiculous. Just go straight up and shoot. That's all you need to do. Hopeless. And yet, this is still not the worst football game that we're going to see on this list. Dangerous Streets is up next in the number 18 slot. There's two terrible versions of Dangerous Streets. In particular, this one, I've gone for a version that could run on an A500. I mean, the CD32 version is bad enough, let alone the fact that it was released as a packing title, as in the main packing title for the friggin' CD32, which basically put that system on a hide into nothing from the get-go. But the A500 version of it, I mean, you basically take everything that was already bad about the original title, and you just make it all slower, you make it all worse. I mean, this A500 version makes Human Killing Machine look like it moves good. The graphics, I mean, again, the graphics, the whole presentation, the sprites, the characters that you play as, they were all terrible enough in the CD32 version, but here on the A500, well, it just looks even worse. So yeah, I mean, the Dangerous Streets experience, as intended on the CD32, is bad enough, but the A500 version, well, that's for those who are really serious about wanting to play the worst stuff on this computer. Things kind of started out nicely for Popeye. Again, Popeye is perhaps an IP that has had more decent-ish games than good. When you think of, you know, the arcade classic from Nintendo, you think of Don Priestley's Game for the Spectrum with its massive big sprites and all of that. But then you also end up with something like Alternative's Popeye 3 Wrestle Crazy. This is, again, another game of 8-bit origin that was already kind of weird enough on the 8-bits. I mean, there's sections in that where you actually fight against xenomorphs from Alien. But here on the 16-bit, I don't know, it just feels even worse than that. Like, the characters that you play against are stupid enough, but the actual wrestling action, I mean, you're not obviously going to expect a deep wrestling experience from a wrestling game that's on the Amiga and is based out of Popeye, but it's literally just hammering buttons. All you need to do to win is get into a grapple, whack buttons, which will take the enemy's health bars straight down, knock him down, and then pin him. That's all you need to do. The gameplay is that simplistic. It's annoying, really, because Popeye 3, like a Popeye wrestling game, especially one with like an intergalactic wrestling theme like this one does, you would hope that even if it is going to be bad, it's so bad that it's going to be funny. In this case, no, there's not even really any humour to be gleaned from this because the gameplay itself is just so shocking. Oh dear, Yolanda. What to say about Yolanda? I mean, Yolanda is essentially a remake of an earlier 8-bit game. It's essentially a remake of Hercules. Hercules was a game that at the time did have an audience, even if when you look back on it, it's clearly quite a frustrating and maddeningly hard experience. But then when you have Yolanda, you get something that, well, again, like other games on this list, like Jet Set Willy 2, takes every conceivable bad thing about the older title and just makes it 1,000 times worse. I mean, the original is already kind of famous for, like, being killed in 5 seconds. Here, though, it seems even tighter. The controls are just not there even when compared to the 8-bit Hercules. And then, of course, there's the horrifying soundtrack. The constant sirens that go off whenever something's about to happen, whenever the platform you're on is about to be set on fire. And the way that the game is, with you going into a different random section every time that you die, even if you've got a trainer on, even if you've got infinite lives, it's virtually impossible to learn. To learn this game would just be the most frustrating experience possible. I mean, I have tried at points. I've done streams where I've played this for a good few hours, well, maybe not a few hours, a couple of hours, and even after 2 hours of playing Yolanda, I did not feel like I'd got anywhere at all. I was still just going onto a different screen every time and dying immediately because of how frustrating this game is. It's just, it purposely makes it impossible for any single layout of there to stick in your head. A horrible, horrible game, well deserving of the reputation that it has. So as far as traditional football games go, this is the worst of them. The worst one of them all has to be Gazza's Super Soccer. Again, another footballer gets a licence, Paul Gascoigne, one of the greatest, one of the most famous English footballing names at the time, and this game does not do him justice. It doesn't even do the current day Paul Gascoigne justice, let's be honest. The stupidest thing about this game, of many, is how it switches views on you endlessly. When you're in the middle, it's a horizontal football game. Then when you get near the area, you've suddenly got an over-the-shoulder type view, and the controls change accordingly. That is very, very annoying. It almost ends up means that you constantly switch between the horizontal and the over-the-shoulder views because your controls change and it just like, oh shit, everything's changed. Now I've got to do this. Thing is, as much as this makes things hard and means that you'll get dispossessed a lot by the opposition are completely stupid. They just shoot the ball at random. Like, they will try and try and try, but honestly, they will almost never score. Half the time when they try and shoot, the ball goes out for a throw-in. If you do get used to the camera switching, it is actually possible in this game to just walk the ball into the goal. In fact, walking the ball into the goal is probably easier than trying to have a shot yourself, because as it turns out, when you do it, even if you like hold the button down for what feels like ages, it still feels like the ball just barely goes in front of you. Dear me. I mean, we have seen some terrible football games on this list, there's no doubt about that, but even European champions cannot compare to something like Gazza's Super Soccer. And despite this, we still have a couple of other sports games kicking about here. We've got a future sports one and another more traditional one. So even this is not the worst actual sports game, believe it or not.
Never shot. Never shot. Never shot.
3001 O'Connor's Fight. I won't deny that most of the games on this list are more actiony titles, they're more like arcade style things. Those are the ones that kind of usually more immediately reveal themselves as bad. 3001 O'Connor's Fight is a bit different. This is yet another game by Rainbow Arts, and you know what? I'm not even sure what it's supposed to be. It's some sort of game where you're in space and there's pirates going around, and I think you have to trade with them or maybe fight them or something. It is incomprehensible. You know, there's kind of there's games on the ZX Spectrum often that are cited amongst the worst games that you might know. Games like Voyage into the Unknown, Cosmic Pirate, The Great Space Race actually is probably the best example. Games that make out as if they're going to be some sort of space simulating strategy type experience, and then when you actually play them, it is impossible to figure out not even just what to do, but how you even do anything. And even if you did figure out, it would be utterly empty. It would reveal itself to be as shallow an experience as they come. 3001 O'Connor's Fight is basically the Amiga's answer to something like The Great Space Race on the ZX Spectrum, to something like Voyage into the Unknown. It's just, what the hell do you even do? And that's enough for it to get right high up in this list. I mean, again, if you look at sites like Lemon Amiga, it's pretty low down on there as well. So, amongst all the arcadey type games on this list, we've got room for something that, well, again, I can't even call it a strategy game. It's a nothing game. It's may as well just be a load of jumbled up code. Eggminator. This is a shoot 'em up. This is a shoot 'em up of German origin, which might possibly be PD, although from the looks of things it might actually have been commercial. I think it was sold for about 20 Deutschmarks. And it's about the poorest excuse for a shoot 'em up there is. This almost feels like, I mean, it's got a bit more gameplay, but it does almost kind of feel like the Amiga's answer to Crazy Bus in many ways. It doesn't feel so much like a game as it does someone was made this to try and test out something, try to learn there's something. Like, you haven't got background scroll in this game, you've got foreground scrolling, and the graphics are so ugly that you wouldn't possibly think this was even a public domain release, let alone a commercial release. The actual gameplay itself does have its rather amusing moments. There are many evil eggs that you've got to kill. You've got the between screen sections where the evil enemy talks at you and says a word to you that I cannot repeat or even show. And then at the end of it all, you'll probably get to the start of the second level and 1,000 eyeballs will descend on you and kill you immediately. And that'll be the end of that. Yeah, that's Eggminator. It's another one of those titles, kind of like Canned Fu, that's incredibly weird and also viscerally unpleasant. International Championship Wrestling. Yep, this is the worst wrestling game on the list. This is a very obscure one indeed, and I believe this was one of the very last releases, tragically, from the almighty Hewson. Hewson did just about manage to scrape their way through to the Amiga era, operating in the end as 21st Century as kind of an offshoot, and publishing games like Pinball Dreams. But International Championship Wrestling was released under the Hewson name, and it's a sad ending. You've got a weird soundtrack that appears to be made up of the WWF Royal Rumble theme in the main. I'm quite positive they didn't get any kind of license to get that in. Other various terrible sound samples are abound. The gameplay is like a thoroughly broken version of, well, one of the earliest wrestling games out there, Rock and Wrestle. I mean, Rock and Wrestle, for the time that it was released, like early mid-80s, was perfectly okay as far as wrestling goes. This one comes out years later in about 1991 and is a joke. It actually moves considerably worse and certainly plays a hell of a lot worse than the old early 8-bit attempt at wrestling. Dear me, I mean, and you wonder how's that even possible, but when you get into this sort of obscure depths of the Amiga, unfortunately this is the sort of thing you find.
Stop it! Boston!
Just outside the top 10, we've got another game that's mainly a PD title, but it was certainly sold for money. Classic Invaders. There are, of course, 1,000,001 games that are clones of Space Invaders, that pay homage to it, that rip it off. Classic Invaders is, yeah, it's the worst. I mean, it's worse even than some of the worst attempts I can think of it on the ZX Spectrum. The main thing about this one is how boring it makes Space Invaders by virtue of being impossibly slow. Like, even when you've got just one alien on the screen that you have to kill, you actually have to work. You probably have to actually work purposefully to get hit, because they're so easy to avoid and so easy to intercept, they just don't move fast enough. So that's just impossible drudgery then and there. You've got, you know, the barriers, I mean, they're pretty useless as it goes anyway, because you don't even really need them, but the collision detection on them is all over the shop. Graphic-wise, even when compared to much earlier Space Invaders clones, it's not there. There's better versions of Space Invaders on the ZX80. In fact, I've played a better version that was designed, much later on, mark you, for the friggin' MK16, a computer that's, well, made from like the 1970s. Almost any platform that you can think of, even the earliest computers around, probably have a better version of Space Invaders than this one right here. It's a joke. So, we've hit the top 10, and even by the standards of what we've seen so far, we're really kicking things up a notch. We start the top 10 with some future sports. Here's Pro Soccer 2190. We have seen some pretty bad regular old football games, but the real worst of them ends up being this futuristic take. This game is just incomprehensible. You get several power bars, or several bars, power, swerve, that come up whenever you try and kick the ball, but it really doesn't seem to have any effect at all. It just still seems to be completely random. I mean, Lord knows how you'd actually go measuring a shot properly when you get these free bars. It doesn't really seem to actually do anything. The whole game is incomprehensible. Even getting into a match is a pain in the arse. And the gameplay is certainly something that speaks to itself with just how choppy the whole thing is. It's way too fast combined with that choppiness. Just a real sight of a game. Rightly very obscure. It's the sort of thing that you probably only really find out about when you go to Lemon Amiga, and you see that this game is right near the very top of that site's bottom list of Amiga games, and quite rightly so. Rainbow Warrior is up next. A licensed game of a sort, one that's got Greenpeace all over it. Don't know what it just is with environmental games sometimes. I mean, obviously they mean well, but then the actual game just ends up being like this one. Horrifying. This is, again, it's another load of minigames, all of which are quite abysmal. Probably the funniest one is when you're trying to protect seals, when you're trying to paint them so that they don't get clubbed. It's just a combination of the rather jaunty and silly upbeat music, with all these sprites moving so fast and then just taking a split second to just whack a seal whenever they get to them, and you just kind of hopelessly jumping along, waiting for some paint can to crop up at completely random, just to try and get anywhere with it. Most of the other mini-games aren't much better. There's other ones where you play as like a fish in the sea and you've got to destroy some sewage pipes, if memory serves me right. There's another one where you've got to stop aerosols from getting up and destroying the ozone layer. It's all just a really silly package indeed that rather cheapens any message that this game was trying to get across. Does not work. So after several terrible sports games, we do finally have the flat-out worst of them. The worst attempt of a sport on the Amiga that I can think of, and it is International Rugby Challenge. This is a particularly disappointing one because Domark, the guys who published this game, they made a perfectly okay rugby game before this, Rugby World Cup, and they made a really bloody good rugby game on Mega Drive by the same name, International Rugby. So you look at that and then you see this and it's a completely different game. It feels like, God, you wouldn't even call it an alpha or a beta version of the game that was on the Mega Drive. Lord only knows who they farmed this out to. There are some things that are particularly infamous about this, especially when you can remember the old Amiga Power review of this that gave the game 2%. The fact that you could just pause the game at any point and the timer won't go down, so if you're leading, then you can just score a try, pause the game, and the match will finish. There's that. But even then, you don't even necessarily need to do that because scoring a try is just so easy. I mean, getting scored upon is kind of easy too because there's not exactly a whole lot you can do to even tackle the opposition. But on the other hand, there's not exactly a whole lot they can do to tackle you. This is just, again, a ridiculous performance. I mean, it's kind of a sad sight. I guess this shows, I mean, this was released 1993 time, 94 time. Shows already just how little certain companies were starting to think of the Amiga at that point when you compare the two different versions of this game and just how utterly, utterly different they are. Another quite hilariously terrible game is here. This is Belial. Belial, a game of Antipodean origin, the one that's a really cheap Ghouls and Ghosts clone that's for some reason soundtracked by Das Model from Kraftwerk, the one where your game will literally last seconds because you're undoubtedly just going to get assaulted by pumpkins who will travel to the very ends of the earth to get you out. So literally the only way you can even have any hope of defeating this game is by using a cheat mode to turn off the collision. There's just, I don't know about this title. I mean, it's amazing really that this one isn't by Kyle Hodgetts. I mean, when you consider the sort of games that he did, it's like the guys who made this saw that and, well, obviously they didn't want to make something worse, but they kind of ended up doing that. I mean, it's only a short game, but just the process of, I mean, I can't even imagine trying to learn it. Oh dear. As far as NES conversions go, you do get a couple of weird ones here and there. As I say, we've seen Castlevania. But Castlevania's bad enough, but Ninja Gaiden 2. Oh, my goodness. I mean, this is kind of quite a random one to begin with. I mean, obviously most of the Ninja Gaiden games that you're going to find on the micros are conversions of the old arcade game. You know, the old beat-em-up that's not particularly good. But then, out of nowhere, yes, you've got this conversion of the NES Ninja Gaiden 2. And it is horrifying. I mean, the best thing that best sums this up is that to use your sword, you have to press down and right on the joystick. The sword, the basic attacking weapon, is not actually mapped to a button. The button's for jumping. I cannot... That's unfathomable to me. Like, to have the basic attack with down and right. The jumping is just all over the shop. The game just seems to hang momentarily anytime you even get hit. It's a pretty bloody mission. It's pretty damn difficult a mission just to get past the first boss with the way the controls are. I mean, Ninja Gaiden 2 is a pretty damn challenging game to begin with, but in this incarnation, when you add the absolute brokenness of it all, yeah, it's really quite something. Lord knows why it even exists. It certainly shouldn't. Oh boy, okay, so we're hitting the top 5. And we start the top 5 with another Spanish game, Sol Negro, Black Sun. The worst attempt, by far, on the Amiga when it comes to a shoot-em-up. This is a jetpack style shoot-em-up where you can walk along the ground very slowly if you so choose, but you kind of have to go right and left. You have to pick up keys, release certain animals, and like a lot of the worst kind of 8-bit shoot-em-ups, enemies are just all over you from the get-go. To be honest, most of the time, you can't even see them because the graphics are so horrific that all the enemies just blend into the background. So 9 times out of 10, when you get killed in this game, you have no idea what did it. You get loads of lives, of course, because that's always the thing that really crappy games do, to try and at least make sure that you play it for more than a few seconds. But almost as soon as you get out of the invincibility period after you've lost life, you'll probably end up getting killed again. Absolutely unspeakable effort. I mean, I ended up discovering this unfortunate title when I did the Amiga Euro platformers wheel. It kind of ended up on there, even though it's not really a platformer, it's more of a shoot-em-up. And yeah, that was a pretty terrible mistake to make, it must be said. In at number 4, we've got Licensed Twaddle. Doctor Doom's Revenge. This is an early game, a license that has you play as Spider-Man and Captain America. Now, normally, having those names associated with it, you'd expect to have something like, even if it's not a very good game, maybe you'll have fun shooting some webs about, maybe you'll have fun twatting people with Captain America's shield. You will not have any fun here at all. It's a beat-em-up of the absolute worst kind, like a broken version, not of like something like International Karate on the C64, a broken version of something like International Karate on the Spectrum. And if you've ever played that, you'll know just how bad that is. Even the first fight with the robot is virtually impossible. Like, you have so few moves. The moves are, again, incomprehensibly mapped. Like, it's like, why on earth is this direction a low kick? Why on earth does this do the shield? Even turning is a pain in the ass. It kind of makes me think of Slaughter Sport in the Mega Drive when it comes to just how annoying it is just to perform the very simplest of tasks, the most basic of punches. Even turning your guy around is a chore. And the collision detection, I mean, there's so many times when it's like, surely you've hit whoever you're facing. Surely you have, but no, you haven't. The collision detection is just, or could basically be not there. Although, make no mistake, the robot or whoever you're facing will certainly not have much trouble hitting you. Again, this is another one that I ended up discovering doing the Euro platformer wheel. I guess I assumed it was a platformer, but it is not, and yeah, quite the a disgusting experience. Just disgusting, I think, is the best word for it. Now, this is a game that I well and truly despise with the very core of my being. George Glaxo. Now, this is not necessarily a wholly commercial title. This is a promo game for, of all things, Glaxo, the pharmaceutical company, and I guess you could call it the Amiga's answer to Captain Novolin. Your hero, and I really hesitate to call him that, needs to get certain items in order to not go drowsy and feel ill and end up then just disappearing. Aside from that, aside from collecting the pills that you need, whether it's day or night, the other thing that you generally seem to do in this game is kill animals. You kill animals, and not like nasty, evil animals, just dogs and cats and birds that are just milling about. But, you know, for whatever reason, old George here has decided that these animals don't need to live anymore. I mean, it's the worst collection of enemies I've ever seen. It's like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this to these perfectly innocent creatures? Like, they're just walking around, and yet for some reason they damage you. Therefore, you've got to take them out. Just horrifying game. Like, all of that, the cute graphics and like this hero who's, again, it's all cartoony, but yes, it's a slaughter fest. I absolutely loathe this game. It's just a very, very hateable title indeed. By the way, this is also from the same folks who brought you Hugo, of all things. So, yeah, that's a interesting factoid, isn't it? Hugo is far, far less objectionable than George Glaxo. I mean, geez, imagine if George Glaxo was the game that ended up on television and not Hugo. That'd be a miserable scenario, wouldn't it? So finally we have the big battle. Which game is going to be number 1? Now, the game that ends up being number 2 is the game that for the longest time was my number 1. The worst game on the Amiga and one of the very worst games that I've ever played. Dick Tracy. Dick Tracy by Titus is, again, obviously it's another licensed game based on the movie, and on basically every platform that this appeared on, this is one of the worst games that you can find. A flick screen actioner that moves, again, it's got that classic really choppy, really fast, the music is an aberration. It's, again, especially annoying considering that it's flick screen, and why on earth this game is flick screen, I have no idea, especially on the Amiga. I mean, we could have done scrolling here, surely. It's a game where usually you end up losing most of your health at the very edge of the screen, because you end up getting trapped by an enemy that's just spawned on you and just getting hit, and inevitably you're too close to them to really do much about it, especially if you've got a gun or whatever, because they're just too close to you, so they just hit you with impunity and then you die, and of course you only get one life. This is so objectionable. Everything about it, I mean, the only thing you can do is just get lucky. Like, there's no point even engaging with the enemies, just run forward until maybe, just maybe, you reach the end of the stage, and then turn it off and burn the whole thing, because why on earth would you subject yourself to it? One of the worst games ever, and yet, nowadays, there is something worse. So I did think long and hard. I thought, what's going to be number one? I knew it was going to be one of these two games. Is it going to be the one that it's always been, or is it going to be the new horror on the block? And in the end, Top Banana is number one. Top Banana is quite possibly my choice for the worst game that I've ever played. And it's terrible in a way that few other games are, in that it's not just that the controls are all over the shop, it's not just that, you know, it's a silly premise or anything, because again, actually the premise and what they were trying to do here is kind of almost a noble thing. Again, it is another environmental game, but the way that this game was done, the graphics are just, well, they're just thrown completely onto the screen as at random, like it quite literally at random from the looks of things. It's almost unsettling at points, unsettling in a really not good way. Like, this is a game that will make some people, when they look at it, it will make some people feel physically sick. And it's not only that, you know, it continues with the sound effects, which are just all completely weirded out. The enemies, again, just all over the shop. And especially those freaking bits later in the game where the whole thing turns negative, and a game that's slow enough as it is moves at half the speed. Once again, this is using the Rainbow Islands formula that we've seen in a couple of titles, but as bad as a game like Huckleberry Hound is, it is nothing compared to Top Banana. There's very few games that are. It's a very special game, but it's special for all the wrong reasons. No game is quite bad in the same way as this one is. It is just something that absolutely should be avoided at all costs. Like, not even something that should be played out of curiosity. Just looking at it for a few seconds should be enough. It is a game that I wish I could forget. It's the worst game on the Amiga, quite possibly the worst game ever made. And there we go. Hopefully doing this for 2 hours has exercised some demons, talking off the cuff, rambling perhaps at times about these 75 rather nasty pieces of work. And perhaps next time that I cover the Amiga, I'll look at something that's actually good for a change. I feel like perhaps I've been looking at too much that's bad about the Amiga, because I do love the system, even if I have played quite so many bad games on it. So yeah, we should do something good next time. But hopefully you have enjoyed this list of awfulness, and until the next time, bye for now.